is coming soon. Hey, young people, and welcome back to another episode of the Youth Ministry Minute Message. This is Brother Kraft once again, and as always, just so thankful to be able to share a portion of God's holy and divine word with you during this time that we're in. Still in the coronavirus pandemic time, still separated this time, and it's been quite a while, but God is still good. So glad that the weather now is acting a bit more normal. It feels good to have the sun shining on my skin once again and get into shorts once again after that crazy snowstorm on last week. We still hope, trust, and pray that you guys' homes have been restored back with power and water and things like that, and everything's back intact, and you still have a comfort level back in your environment. So if you still need anything, please let us know. And I'm not just saying that. Reach out to me, even if it's in Group Me. All right. Last week, I told you we were going into a new topic, right? I told you we were going into the topic of discussing God's names and the characteristics that come along with his names, right? And I gave an example about how my name is Archie Kraft and how people refer to me in different ways, and similarly to God, right? And we kicked it off by having you research what your names meant. You guys did a phenomenal job. Let me just celebrate you guys for that. We had over 10 youth who celebrated and chimed in with the meanings of their names, and hopefully you guys learned something about your names, right? And just probably learned something new about what your name actually meant. Now, listen, those names that you have, or the name that you have, is what your character and your person is supposed to be about. Remember, I told you that in biblical times, when a child was given a name, those names actually meant something. So even if you didn't think so, your name means something, and it's supposed to similarly assimilate to the person that you are, right? So before you were born, your parents thought long and hard about what they would name you. All right. And so if your name has a powerful meaning, you will be out of character to act in contradiction to that name, right? For example, if your name means bold and brave, kind of like mine does, right? I would be out of character to be scared and a timid person, right? Because my name means something, all right? Even though I'm named after my dad, as my son is, we would be out of character to act anything other than what our name means, right? So let's get started. Let's look at our memory verse for this week. Remember, memory verse coming from Exodus chapter 3, verses 13, and in particular 14, right? It says, "But Moses protested, 'If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them?' Verse 14, here we go. God replied to Moses, 'I am who I am.' Says, say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent you to me.'" All right. So we learned last week about God's name, that great I am. And we said that, kind of seems unfinished, right? The clause in that English vernacular is kind of unfinished, but God knew exactly what he was saying. He says, I am whatever, in essence, you want me to be, right? I can be anything you want me to be. I can be your mentor. I can be your friend. I can be anything, right? So last week we looked at the first characteristic of God's name, and we want to look at, remember, Yahweh Jireh, or Jehovah Jireh, which means God will provide. We talked about how God, even when we don't see a solution, he'll make a way, he'll make a provision, he'll provide a way for you, even when we don't see it, right? His timing, get this, is not always our timing, right? But he's never late, right? He will always come through and provide. That's just who he is. That's just his character. That's just his nature, is to be a provider for us and to love us. All right. So you got to believe it. You got to understand it. You got to get to know it. And you got to study it. Remember, he will provide, just like he did for Abraham and Isaac in that story we talked about last week. God will do even greater for you. All right. Now, this week's characteristic of God, we're going to look at, comes to view when we are feeling lonely, and sometimes maybe you're feeling invisible. You're feeling like, and I'm not talking about like Harry Potter's cloak of invisibility. No, I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about just feeling like no one seems to care, right? Like you're going through the motions, like even right now, going through virtual school, and there's no friends around, and their teachers are like far in a distance, and those things are just not really seeming like the teacher's really not focused per se on any one student, rather the class, and it makes you feel some type of way. Or have you ever felt like no one is considering you or your needs? That's what I'm talking about feeling alone and invisible. But this is where another intrinsic characteristic of God comes into play. God's name in this case is El Roy. All right, El Roy. That means the God who sees me. The God who sees me. That's awesome, right? God wants us to know that He is there all the time. He's with you all the time. He sees you all the time. He wants you to know that even though you might feel alone, you're never alone. He says you're never alone. His presence is always there to comfort you, even when it seems like no one's there to comfort you, right? We sing this song, He's got the whole world in His hands. And once again, going back to the previous lesson we talked about, that's the macro vision of having God having the world in His hand. But get this, He can zoom in and look at your life in particular, all right, and be there for your characteristics just as well. So yes, He has the whole world in His hand, but He also sees you and me. And that's the amazing thing about the God that we serve. He can zoom in, and we talked about that, micro and macro. He can zoom into your life and get right in the depths, right next to you, right side by side with you, and be there for you because He sees you. We get this name from the Bible passage in Genesis chapter 16, verses 6 through 13. And it's a story of Abraham and his wife Sarah and his handmaiden Hagar. All right, let's go there. Genesis chapter 16. Verse 6 says, Abraham replied, "Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." Then he added, "I will give you more descendants than you can count." And the angel also said, "You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all of his relatives." Therefore, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" Wow, did you see that? Hagar felt alone. She had run away because she thought she was feeling done wrong so badly by Sarai that she ran away. And even in the midst of running away and being lonely, we find that the angel of the Lord come and sees her right where she is, in all of her hurt and all of her pain and all of her anguish and all of her feeling like she was being disrespected. He comes and he sees her, right? That's amazing. Running away, God, young people, is never the answer if you haven't communicated and consulted with God. As she ran, we see she was stopped again by this angel. And in verse 13 is where we get today's characteristic of God, where she says that the Lord sees me. I know right now that the Lord sees me. So even in all of our mess and all of our struggles and all of the bad decisions and loneliness that we may endure, we have a God that cares for us and that sees us. That's so important. A God that's just concerned with you in particular, who loves you individually and wants a personal relationship with you guys. Each one of you, each one of us, He wants a relationship with each one of us. But we can't lean on our own understanding. Like Hagar, she ran, just leaned on our own understanding. We got to learn to lean on God because first, He sees us and He loves us, right? This is not even the most interesting part of the story, though, to me, because the most interesting part of the story really is when Hagar is you got to understand who Hagar is. Hagar actually is an Egyptian. So she wasn't even of the family of God. Yet we see God come to her and say that I see you. That's amazing. When we think that people are not in the family of God, God always has a reason to say He loves you. And God loves all of His creation. So we see that this is an important fact that God sees us all. He sees each and every one of us, and He's there for us as long as we can have a relationship with Him and put Him first. All right. I hope and trust and pray that you see that El Roy is present in your life and that He's trying to let you know that He wants to be a part of your life. There's a verse in Revelation that says, God is knocking at the door. Will you let Him in? He sees you. He wants to be a part, and he wants to develop you and develop your relationship. All right. I love you so much. I thank you so much for listening and being attentive to what we're talking about this morning. The names of God. All right. That's our lesson that we're doing. Group me, group me. We know Elroy means the God who sees me in Hebrew. Share with the group why this name is so important. Why is it important to you today that God sees you and he sees me? Why is it important, young people? I hope you find it important to know that God sees you. All right. I love you so much. I thank you once again for chiming in and being a part of this lesson. I love you and I thank you. And I'll continue to pray for you as you pray for me. All right. Brother Kraft, out. Jesus is coming soon.